hopefully you can all see my exciting screen. And I've just got a few slides because this is our whistle-stop tour of pathological demand avoidance. So it's kind of going through some of the basics with you and giving you some kind of key ideas as we go through, hopefully. So the first thing to talk about when we talk about pathological demand avoidance is to talk about what it is. So what it actually is, and this is from Jane Sherwin, who kind of was one of the kind of founding fathers of it. It's an anxiety-driven need to avoid demands, and it's about trying to remain in control. And when we look at the three keywords, it's about being pathological. So it's not a choice. They don't choose to do it. They don't choose to kind of act in a certain way. It really is pathological. They have to do it. They have to have that control. They have to avoid it. And it's about demands, and it's kind of any demands. And I'll talk a little bit later in this bit about the different types of demands you might see and you might encounter. So there's lots of different versions. And then it's that avoidance, and it is them trying to get away from it, to be nowhere near it. And that's kind of what they're looking for. So it's that pathological demand avoidance. So it's not the most common one that everyone's heard of, but I think it's starting to come more and more into the mainstream, and people are starting to see it more and more as they're going through. So I thought it would be interesting for you to see just the history of it and when it goes back to. So it starts off with some work by Elizabeth Newsom right the way back in the 80s. And then through the 80s and onwards, it's kind of been developed very slowly. It was first put onto the National Autistic Society's website in 2008. So it's really not that long ago when you consider that. But it is still kind of pushing forward, and there is still kind of a lot of work to be done to get it totally accepted and to make sure that people totally understand it. So there's quite a few books and things out there, but the PDA Society is a really useful one, and so is the National Autistic Society. They have quite a bit of information on it as well, so it's well worth looking at. So when we're looking at a formal definition is this, and this is from the National Autistic Society's website. And they change this regularly. So this is the latest version that was up there. And it's basically, they're putting it down as a behaviour profile within the autism spectrum. So it comes under that umbrella of autism. But the challenge is people with PDA, it's about them having difficulties in certain areas, but similarities in others. So their communication, their social interaction, those kind of things may kind of still be challenged, but in a different way. They may still have those repetitive patterns of behaviour, and they may still have a focus on particular interests and things. But again, their need is based all around anxiety. So their levels of anxiety are so much higher than anybody else's because they are constantly trying to remain in control. And it's about trying to have that control. And you can imagine in a school, there isn't that control for them because everything is run by bells. So the bell rings and they've got to go and do something. Or this is the task and you've got to go and do something. And that really affects their anxiety because that's a demand that is being put on them regularly. So you really have to consider kind of what that might look like. So when we're looking at what you might see in terms of characteristics and behaviours that you might kind of encounter, they're going to resist the ordinary demands of life. And this can be something as simple as putting your shoes on, getting dressed on a morning, having your breakfast, eating your food. If it's a demand and someone says it in a demanding way, they're going to struggle against it. Their anxiety is going to rise and they're going to really struggle to kind of do it. Their anxiety is so high, it's kind of the thing that overwhelms everything. Their social strategies are really clever. So what they will do is they will often be very good socially, but it's on a superficial level. So they will have those friends, but they will manipulate the situation to remain in control. And that's a challenge in unstructured times when you consider those things. So they appear very sociable and they appear very friendly, but they will also then demonstrate really excessive mood swings. So they'll have that impulsivity and it'll be really quite challenging the way they demonstrate that. They love role play, which is very different to people on the autism spectrum. They love role play and pretending to the extent that sometimes they will even role play the good child. So they will come into school and play the part during the day. So during the day in your presence, they are going to play the role of the good student and do everything that's asked. But what's happening is that anxiety is building and building and building till it massively overflows when they get home. So the meltdown will often come at home rather than in school. But that can be very clearly a trait of theirs. They often, in younger students, they'll have a language delay. Not normally a disorder, normally a delay. So they'll have a delay in getting the language, but once they get it, they will fly. So again, it might just be kind of being aware of if someone's had a language delay, it could be something that kind of goes into kind of PDA later on. They will often have obsessive behavior, but it often isn't about objects, it's often about people. And that's the challenge. So they'll often kind of become really obsessed with people that they will absolutely love them or they will absolutely hate them, which can be really difficult. If you are their teacher and they suddenly decide that you are the one they're going to hate, that's really difficult to deal with. How do you address that and how do you follow it? But again, when they love you, though, they will do anything for you. So it's about kind of those relationships and how you build them and how you keep them. The challenge with them in terms of friendship groups is they can become really domineering and overbearing because they need to take control. So in group work, they'll always want to be the one who's directing how it goes and what happens and who's doing what. They'll always be the one who takes the step back and goes, no, this is what I think. And they'll be the ones pushing it. So that can be really challenging. So often they'll prefer to talk to the adults because if they can talk to the adults, it takes away some of that. So they will often want to sit near you in the classroom. So they'll want to sit near the front next to you, because that way, when they kind of don't want to do the task and they want to get away from it, they'll talk to you as an adult. And they will have the language skills as they get older to be able to have a really intelligent kind of conversation with you. And they'll be really good at manipulating the situation. I used to work with a young man who was excellent at getting me off track. He knew exactly what to say to get me to go and do what he wanted to do rather than doing the piece of work. So again, that is kind of, they're socially aware that they know exactly what the topic is to say to get you off track. And they will do that with everybody. So they will kind of go through that. Now, I've got a little video. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see it. If for some reason it doesn't work, let me know. And what we can do is we can make sure that we'll kind of attach the link to the kind of recording so you can have a look at it yourself. So hopefully this will work.
My friend has a gorgeous dog called Teddy who likes to play fetch. This is the most stupid thing about demand avoidance. When he sits there looking at me with the ball in his mouth, I get an instant feeling of dread and panic. I hate to let him down, but there's no way I can throw the ball for him.
It's like my body has two control centres. One is my heart and one is my brain. My heart wants to do something, but my brain says no. And no matter how hard I try, my brain just won't let me do it. It's like there's a train, and there is a driver at each end. Both drivers are pulling in a different direction, so the train can't go anywhere. It just stays still. It freezes like me.
A boyfriend once asked why it was that whenever he requested I do something, I asked him to do something in return for me. What he didn't understand was that his demands felt more bearable if I negotiated a tit-for-tat kind of bargain. It restored control for me.
So I just really like that, because when it's from their point of view, it really has way more power than me telling you about it. And I just really love the train analogy, the idea that they're being pulled in two different directions. So not only have they got all this anxiety, but they feel like they're being pulled. And it's really difficult, especially if they desperately want to do something as well. So kind of, I had a young man whose favorite thing was to go swimming with the class, but we were in an autistic specific provision. So we had a kind of behavior chart with him. And every time he got the one tick away to getting to go swimming, he would do something so dramatic that he couldn't go swimming. And it was almost like a self-sabotaging behavior. So for us, the solution to that was we got rid of the tick chart. We had the tick chart in the back of the teacher's planner, but he never saw it. And we asked his parents to send us a swimming kit in to keep in school. So we would keep the tick chart. And when we knew he'd had a good day, we knew the next day we were going to send him swimming. So as soon as he walked in the door, it would literally be, there's your bag, turn around, off you go. And he'd go off swimming and he'd get his reward without having to process it and think about it. So he couldn't allow that train to pull him in two different directions. He just got to get the reward. So sometimes it's about being as spontaneous as you can with these young people to kind of give them that reward that they're going to need. So when you think about it, it's considering the fact that demands are not just one thing. You've got direct demands, which is where we specifically ask them to do something. So again, how many times do you do a direct demand in your classroom? And I'm sure you lose count of how many times. Can you get your pens? Can you write your name? Could you do the date? It's just constant demands, and they can be really challenging. But then we've also got subtle demands. So these are where you're kind of giving them a little bit more choice. So could you do this or this? I wonder if you can do that by the time I've done that. They'll handle a subtle demand slightly better, but if their anxiety is high, they're still not going to be able to do it. And then you've got silent demands. These are the things that are just expected. So the school rules are silent demands. It's expected that they sit in their chair. It's expected that they are quiet when the teacher is speaking. It's expected that they wear clothes to go outside. You know, those kind of things. They're silent demands, but they're still demands. And then finally, the thing that causes a lot of our students the biggest challenge is the self-imposed demands. These are the ones that they put in themselves. So these are the ones where there's something they really, really want to do, but they can't build themselves up to do it, like going swimming or going out on a trip or going somewhere. Starting a task can be really challenging for them, knowing how to actually start it, because they know it's there, they want to do it, but it's a self-imposed to get started, and therefore the anxiety builds up and it really challenges. So what you will see is you'll see some very creative ways of avoiding demands. And this is the bit that I love this, because they come up with some amazing kind of things. So we've said they'll manipulate those social situations. They will do that quite regularly to kind of avoid it. They will just plain refuse. If their anxiety is so high, they will just say, nope, not doing it. And again, it's about, well, how is that the problem? Well, how can we help? How can we support them? Then you've got making excuses. So this could be anything from, I haven't got the right pencil. I've also seen them kind of snap pencils under tables to go, oh, my pencil's broke, I can't do it. Those kind of things. So they'll make excuses. If it's a PE lesson, oh, I broke my leg, is a lovely one. And you're like, kind of, yes, I don't think you have, because you're still walking around. But okay, let's have a look. So again, they'll make excuses to get out of it. Distraction technique. I had a young man who was very good at this. He used to often just randomly shout things in the class that all of the rest of the students would then get distracted, so that he didn't have to do the work until everyone was settled. And it would be things like, oh, is that a squirrel in the tree? And everybody was then looking at the squirrel, and you were like, no, we don't have squirrels around here, thank you. And again, having to do that. So that distraction can be really, really good one. They will sometimes argue, and my advice on that one is to just not argue. You are the adult, do not argue. And mine would always be, I am not arguing with you. I'm going to give you a minute to calm down, and then we might talk about it, but I'm not arguing. Procrastination. And I'm quite a master of this myself, so I kind of recognize it. But that procrastination of kind of, I just need to line my pens up. I just need to get a particular pen. I just need to get a particular chair. All of those kind of things. They'll procrastinate as much as they can. Then we've got the negotiating, where they'll negotiate with you. The challenge of negotiating with you, though, is they'll negotiate and then they'll keep negotiating. So, for example, they might say, I don't want to do the writing, can I do it on a computer? And you'll immediately go, yeah, that's fine, let's get you a computer. Oh, I don't want that computer, can I have a different computer? Or then they'll spend 20 minutes looking at different fonts to use. So again, if they're going to negotiate, make sure you're very specific about what the negotiation is and what they have to do. Physically incapacitating themselves, so kind of biting at fingernails until they start to bleed, so they have to leave the classroom. I've also seen someone kind of picking at scabs, so they've got to do it so that they've got to go out of the room, so they will physically do that to themselves. They will suggest alternatives. Do I have to do this now? Could we not do this later? And if I did this first? So it's almost like negotiating, but they don't want to have a negotiation. They just want to tell you they don't want to do it. They want to do something else. So again, kind of noticing the difference between those. And the final one that is really challenging is when they withdraw into their fantasy world. Now, sometimes they withdraw into their fantasy world of the perfect school, which is great, and then they'll get on with their work. Other times they withdraw into this fantasy world of somewhere else, and to try and get them back out can be really challenging. And even when they withdraw into that role play of the perfect school, that is really challenging, because you know the anxiety is still building up, and you know actually when they get home, they're going to have a very, very bad evening, because it's got to come out at some point. So again, trying to keep them out of that fantasy world and giving them different alternatives. So when we're looking at this, two of the key things to think about is giving them options you're comfortable with. You've got these two things to do. Which do you want to do first? Is a really simple strategy, but works really powerfully. And the other one that is really beneficial is making it almost a competition. I don't think you can do that before I've done this, and always make the competition with you, because it's fine if you don't win, but I wouldn't make it a competition in the class, because then it becomes a very competitive thing. But again, kind of, there is no way you can do that before I've done this. Not going to happen. You can't have given out all of those pencils by the time I've done the register. Again, giving them it in those ways, and then it's not a direct demand, it's more subtle, and they see it as a competition. And the one thing about PDA, they'll love to prove you wrong. So therefore, they're going to love to be able to go, I did it before you, and show you that you did it wrong. So again, thinking about it in those terms. I love this one. It's about making sure that they're not being difficult, that it is part of the autism spectrum, and we need to kind of understand it. And the more we understand it, the more beneficial it's going to be for everyone concerned. And that for me is the key thing that we need to kind of look at. And I will